Another day, another step towards the possible fall of Tripoli. Al-Zawiya is just 30 miles west of the capital along the coast. The town now appears to be controlled by anti-Gaddafi forces. The net is closing, but the capital is home to a third of Libya's population. It remains in government hands. Parts of the desert are still controlled by Gaddafi. That didn't stop a daring special forces rescue mission of stranded British workers. They were clearly grateful that someone had come to get them. It was launched out of Malta, a quick operation in both planning and execution. The special boat service flew out of the island in 2 Hercules. They made final preparations on board. Spy planes located the targets and looked for potential opposition. As they neared the oil camps, AC-130 gunships were overhead providing cover.
It was all very last minute. Things had to be kept quiet because things were getting leaked to the media about where people were and things, so it was all very organised and excellent for the British military.
It was a strange and real experience. I mean, the last thing you'd expect is an RAF Hercules arriving in our desert camp.
Unbelievable, because one come in, we've seen that leaving, and then we get told it was the second one couldn't get permission to land. So hopes were dashed, and then when we get told it was coming in, and it was all just bang straight up again, we were on it.
However, there remain British workers elsewhere who couldn't be reached. Some Britons had managed to get to Benghazi, a port town, and there HMS Cumberland was waiting to pick them up.
We left the oil field yesterday, but we left really under our own steam. We contacted the company, the field superintendent, and got a bus to Ojala from the field, and from there we met a retired company employee who drove us to Benghazi. So we really did it ourselves.
Support for Gaddafi still exists. It appears to dwindle each day. They're well armed, and as well as militia, there are many well-trained military personnel still prepared to fight. These men chanted their support at a checkpoint 6 kilometres from Tripoli. There are similar scenes on the east, west and southern approaches to the capital. It remains well defended. There's still no sign of a march on Tripoli. If it is to fall, at the moment, it still needs to be pushed from the inside. There are signs of that. Here, people attack a poster of Gaddafi. Bit by bit, his authority is being stripped away. To Marshall, Sky News on the West Libyan border.
Just hearing now from Germany's foreign minister that 132 German civilians have now been rescued from the desert by German special forces in an operation similar to that carried out yesterday by UK special forces. Well, of course, the focus is on Tripoli. We know there are protests on a regular basis in and around the suburbs of the capital. We know that there is fierce fighting to the west of Tripoli, but inside it's hard to tell what's going on. Sky News' Lisa Holland is inside Tripoli. I must remind you that everything she has to say is under the close supervision of the Libyan government, and there are some problems with communications, but bear with us. Lisa, tell us what you know today.
Well, Andrew, we've just been returned to our hotel here in Tripoli after a 7-hour bus ride around the outskirts of Tripoli. Now, we weren't entirely sure where we were going to end up when we left this hotel this morning. Some suggestion that we would go to Zawiya, this town which had reportedly fallen a few days ago. But nobody from the outside world, nobody from outside Libya, no independent journalist had reached Zawiya until we did this morning. Now, what was really extraordinary about today is that we were taken to this town of Zawiya by our government minders, and then we reached a point on the outskirts about a mile or so from the centre of Zawiya, and our military escorts told us that they weren't prepared to go any further. I wonder whether we were being used as guinea pigs in some way to go in and find out exactly what was going on now in the centre of Zawiya. We went into Zawiya and it became clear that the centre of Zawiya, Martyrs Square, the heart of of this district is in the hands of anti-Gaddafi protesters. We saw tanks and anti-aircraft guns on the back of pickup trucks, which they have now claimed as their own. They were beating Gaddafi posters. We were told that there had been fierce clashes there on Thursday, and that they told us that more than 20 people had been killed and dozens had been wounded. Then left Zawiya and were taken to various other parts of the district, again about 30 kilometres outside of the capital Tripoli. This time we were taken to pro-Gaddafi rallies. We saw a lot of pro-Gaddafi supporters shouting his name, saying that they would die for him. What does this tell us? It tells us that certainly now Colonel Gaddafi, if he wants to regain control of parts of this capital, he will have to launch a civil war, because there are places now which are out of his control. But by no means are there vast swathes of this capital which are out of his control. If you drive around the centre of Tripoli, quite firmly, it is his face which beams down from the billboards here. People are going about their business. They are trying to take money out of the banks. They are trying to buy bread and supplies, because they fear that the end game in Tripoli, the capital here now, is looming.
Lisa, do you get any sense of the confidence, of the atmosphere amongst the people that you've met today in Tripoli?
Yes, we of course met people from both sides now, the pro and the anti-Gaddafi. Both feel very strongly. Those in support of Gaddafi, very strong of voice, waving the flags of this country. What we can't say particularly is how strong they are. We saw a few hundred in one particular area. We saw others waving flags and cheering along the roads as we were travelling in this convoy. I think word has spread now that there is this convoy of journalists travelling around the centre of Tripoli. Equally, there was great defiance from the anti-Gaddafi people who have claimed the centre of Zawiya now. In fact, they were sitting on the top of the tanks with the weapons that they say they had seized from the military, prepared, they say, to fight against a counter-attack from Gaddafi soldiers should that happen.
Lisa, thanks very much indeed. Lisa Holland there, our Foreign Affairs editor, correspondent reporting from Tripoli. Let's go to the east of the country now, to the town of Al Baida, some 250 miles east of where I am. Sky's Alex Rossi is there. Alex, we know that there's talk of preparations for momentum to continue the protest towards Tripoli, but also concerns about safety. What have you been learning today, Alex?
Well, I've been given a unique insight into the heart of the resistance movement, Andrew. I've been given an interview with the president of the new National Council, effectively the provisional government of what is now liberated Libya. This is a former justice minister called Mustafa Abdul Jalil. He has a record of blocking Gaddafi. He was part of Gaddafi's government, but defected 10 days ago. He has emphasised human rights. I've been told by somebody I've spoken to at Human Rights Watch that they are quite happy to see him holding the reins, really, of power of liberated Libya. Now, he also gave me an insight into what the country may look like, or how it might develop. And they are certainly talking about developing a country along democratic lines. He was talking about a new constitution in which human rights would be heavily emphasised and codified in a new kind of national Bill of Rights. But he also gave me some information about how they are thinking in terms of regaining control, or taking control rather, of the whole country. They are hoping, the rebels at the moment, that the protest movement alone will be enough to collapse Gaddafi and his regime from the inside. But in their thinking now is certainly the possibility of moving on Tripoli with force. We've heard about those key cities and towns around Tripoli now which have fallen. Lisa was talking then about the kind of ammunitions that they've confiscated and they're taking away to storage. And certainly the possibility of taking Tripoli by force does exist tonight. It's some way down the road, if you like, but it is now on the table, and it is now being thought about by the revolutionary movements.
Alex, thanks very much indeed. Alex Rossi there live for us in Al Baida. Let's go back to our Foreign Affairs editor, Tim Marshall, who can join me on the line from the Tunisian border, the west side. Remember, that's west of Tripoli, also west of that town Al-Zawahir that we've been hearing so much about in the past few days, and that Lisa Holland was saying that she saw evidence there tonight of some control being assumed by anti-government protesters. Tim Marshall, then, what do you know about the situation in Zawahir, and what do you know about weapons that the opposition may have now?
I think most of it would be light arms, and yes, they were standing around on tanks, but unless the army has gone over to them, they wouldn't know how to use the heavy weaponry that would be available. As to the situation in and around the city, we spoke to 3 dual national Libyans who were actually going into Libya today. They're the only 3 we saw. We've seen another 10,000 to 12,000 people streaming out, 3 going in. And we got hold of them. It took them about 6 hours to get to Tripoli, but they went right past the town, and they said on the outskirts of town there are still pro-Gaddafi military, and they are all prepared. Whether they're going to try and go back in is another issue. But there are pro-Gaddafi military, quite well equipped. And so picking up on Alex's idea of a march on the capital, they'd have to come through those lines. Also, if you're talking about Benghazi coming, that's another 500 miles away. They would have to get past the town of Sirte, which is still loyal to Gaddafi. In fact, it's his hometown. He was born about 40 miles south of it. So I can see where Alex is coming from, that you can see down the line, if Tripoli does not implode and he's overthrown from the inside, they would have to look at some plan of how to take it from the outside, and that would be exceptionally difficult.
Indeed. Tim, thanks very much indeed. Tim Marshall, our Foreign Affairs editor. Now, let's talk a little bit about Benghazi. This is the heart of the opposition movement, there's no doubt about that. The state radio station here has now been taken over by the opposition, and they've fired up the equipment and are broadcasting through the radio now. They're calling it Radio Free Libya. It gives you an idea of why Benghazi is central to this. More sophisticated, better equipped with infrastructure than Al Baida, where Alex is, or indeed Tobruk, where we were earlier on. Also, I met a businessman here, a classic example of a key player in this opposition movement, well-educated, speaks English fluently, runs his own business here, has no political ambitions, but people like this have been playing an enormous part in the coordination and organisation of how this opposition movement is taking hold, and the interim government they have ambitions for. This is my visit now to Radio Free Libya.
استقبلنا المستمعين إلى تصريح للواء الركن محمود محمد الدغاري آمر منطقة الجبل الأخضر الدفاعية.
Well, this is the Chief Engineer's office at what was the state broadcaster here in Benghazi. You know, on the night of the riots, the authorities opened all the doors of a prison just 2 miles from here. All the inmates escaped. They came here to the state broadcaster, and this is the result. There's been an awful lot of damage. In a moment, we're going to speak to a local businessman, Jalal Al-Jalal, about the rebuild. But first, let me show you some of the equipment that has survived. The prisoners came here as well. They had a go at a lot of the FM broadcasting stuff for radio, but it still works. There's some TV broadcasting kit here as well. This could work as well, but the satellite itself is broken, so at the moment they can't broadcast on television. The radio station, well, it used to be called State Radio, now it's known as Radio Free Libya.
والذي أراد أن يشارك معنا ويعلن تضامنه كأي مواطن ليبي مع هذه الثورة. The manager of the station here, the radio station that has volunteered its help, he said to me, thank God they didn't destroy all the equipment.
It was systematic. They don't destroy it literally by force, but they were destroying it by the fact it is old, it is obsolete, there is no spare parts, there is no financing, there is none of these aspects. But these people, they're fighters. They wanted it to work because probably in the back of their minds one day they could be useful, and it turned out to be so. It is extremely unbelievable, the number of people who turned up offering their services, every aspect of life. Had representative coming willing for no pay, without protection, in a very volatile situation. It is really overwhelming, it really is.
Was this something that in the back of your minds was building as a plan for a long time, or has this happened completely?
It was absolutely spontaneous. We did not plan this. When they were spreading that there is demonstrations on the 17th, we were asking for basic things. The reaction of the regime and preempting their own demonstrations resulted in the shooting of a lot of the youths. And suddenly, and I guess in a way it is very lucky, the youth reacted very quickly. They gave them no time to regroup or hold the city. They hit them hard at a very expensive cost.
Do you want a place in this new government?
I do not want a place in this government. I'm basically an activist, a person who lives here, a Libyan, a Benghazian.
A kingmaker, perhaps?
A facilitator would be better. A facilitator would be better. After 10 days, I can say that the momentum is good. We hope that it will continue. I hope that as things are set up and people are seeing some sort of a structure with a temporary government, that the situation will continue as it is. That hopefully Tripoli will soon be liberated, because Tripoli will and is and will always remain as the capital of Libya. And we are doing our best to try to get there as soon as possible. Logistically, it's very difficult at the moment, but we're trying to get all the forces together to assemble some sort of a plan to try to help Tripoli in particular.